Hey everybody, my name's Chris, and I'm a bookaholic. All right, today I want to talk a little bit about historical fiction, but specifically in the world of World War II. And there's a lot of books out there, tons of books, some a little bit more grounded in truth than others. And honestly, I really like this time period. It's a very profound time period in American history and really global history for that matter. And some of the things that obviously happened should never be forgotten. And some of these books were exceptional, not only from a literary standpoint, but the storytelling abilities were masterful and incredible. Here's a couple that I've enjoyed. Most of these I've read, and there's a lot of other ones that I'm going to reference. Hopefully I can get the picture of them to kind of come up as well. And at the end, maybe you have some books that you really liked in this genre. I find a lot of people seem to enjoy this kind of subgenre. And I'll start with a book that's probably not very well known by an author that many of you probably have not read. This is a guy named Michael D. O'Brien. Michael O'Brien wrote this book, Sophia House. Sophia House, put out on Ignatius Press. And on the front of most all of Michael O'Brien's books is usually an icon, and he painted or drew those. He's an iconographer, a very talented artist. And Michael O'Brien is a Canadian who has written a number of books, and oftentimes they're pretty beefy, meaty books that are not just interested in just telling a story, but are oftentimes grounded and surrounded in people trying to unpack who they are and the struggle of life. Usually you get a lot of situations and scenarios where people get to give and explore their philosophical underpinnings and worldviews. And sometimes it can get a little bit lengthy and you almost wish maybe it would be edited down a hair. But honestly, when it comes to me and Michael O'Brien, I'm kind of in it for the long haul. So I don't really care how long he's going to take to develop and unpack his story. I know I'm going to enjoy it. It's going to be in a world that's very unique, but there'll be a lot of times some situations that are very profound and usually can get a little bit of a tear up now and then. This book was pretty exceptional. It involves a gentleman who is an artist and ends up owning a bookstore, and we kind of hear the story of him hiding a young Jewish boy that is, of course, being hunted by Nazi Germany at that time. It's pretty profound, to say the least. Sophia, obviously, the word Sophia means wisdom, and so there is something about this idea of wisdom, and so there's a lot of discourse and things within the book that are going to be pressing your understanding of philosophy and even theology. The main character in here, the young boy specifically, will grow up and become Father Elijah, who has his own book called Father Elijah, so you can hear more about the boy in later years. So, all right, another book which I have not actually read is just called Liberation, and this is put out by Imogen Keeley, and I don't really know much about this, but there's a lot of books that came out in this genre, such as We Were the Lucky Ones by Georgia Hunter. And again, I have not read these last two books, but I'm pretty sure that I would like them because I like this kind of setting and the heroic stories of people amidst great difficulty. A book I did read, which it was highly recommended to me, is called The Book Thief, which many of you have read. Markus Zusak is an author who's probably most known for this book. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's definitely worth your time. In the beginning, I think in the beginning when I first started reading this book, I wasn't sure exactly if I was going to like it. It kind of starts out from the perspective of death, and I didn't think I was going to enjoy or want to be in that character, if you will, for the whole time. But this does unfold in a way that is very beautiful and very profound. And with my love for books, I especially was drawn in. And this book did not disappoint. And there were certainly some very profound and intense moments, as you can imagine. A book that did kind of surprise me, and it might have been my very first book by Jodi Picoult, was called The Storyteller. This is definitely her MO, is that she likes to create a story that has a weird, bizarre twist. It makes for a great story, but this usually, her books usually kind of are circling around a very controversial subject or some sort of a scenario that isn't just a nice, tidy little bow at the end. It's not going to wrap up exactly perfectly. And it gets you wondering and questioning, what would I be like or do in that scenario and situation? And this book especially is going to ask you to explore some possibilities when it comes to forgiveness, and when it comes to friendship, and when it comes to truth and honesty. Didn't know much about this book at all. I just had picked it up one day, maybe a couple years ago now, and I thought I'm going to give it a go, and I found myself immediately drawn in, and I loved it. So if you've not read The Storyteller, I do recommend it, and it's definitely going to be something that is going to cause you to be probably a little bit irritated at the end, but for those of you familiar with Jodi Picoult's work, I don't think that's a surprise. This book here, I listened to a couple years ago on Audible, All the Light We Cannot See. And this book, my friends, is phenomenal. Of course, it's exceptionally revered. It's a winner of the Pulitzer Prize. And Anthony Doerr is an author of not only just great skill, but great imagination. He is able to create characters in a familiar scenario and scene that you find yourself completely drawn in and cheering for and hoping for. I think it's interesting with these books a lot of times too, is that we find ourselves oftentimes placed into a scenario that we're familiar with, and yet we're kind of hoping for some different endings and some sort of happy ending when we know that that's impossible. And All the Light We Cannot See is going to give a couple different perspectives within the time period, of course, of the World War II. It was very different. You get to have a little bit of a perspective from a character who's German that I found to be a little bit different and fascinating. So you've probably read it. I listened to it and I found the audio version to be very well done. Here's a book that I have not finished. I'm having a hard time finishing it. Some people have this book in their TBR, and some people have DNF'd it, and some people are just kind of holding off, not sure. It's called A Gentleman in Moscow, obviously. Amor Towles. I personally liked what I read from the beginning, and I'm not 100% sure why, but I got a little bit distracted and I started reading something else. And I found myself just trying to figure out, do I want to go back into that world? I'll probably revisit this just because there's been so much praise for the book. For some people, it's one of their all-time favorites. Speaking of all-time favorites, I'm going to give you a book, and I know that for some of you, you're not going to like it because the writing is not as good as with the last two books, especially that we've kind of highlighted. But this book I loved, and it's called Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan. The struggle for me was that the main character, your protagonist here, is basically in real life maybe not the most amazing person that you find him to be in the story. I might be able to kind of detach myself from that because the story I found to be very interesting. A lot of these books, of course, you're going to get the perspective of either those who are in Germany or those who are in Poland. You're going to have kind of these traditional tellings of this time period, which I particularly enjoy. This to be for me was very interesting because this took place with the Italian resistance, and I loved it. I know that it's not maybe a gorgeous masterpiece in terms of its writing style, but for me, because it was different and because I fell really and found myself very involved with the character, I just loved it. The Nightingale is, of course, for many people, one of their most favorite books in this genre. I did enjoy this book a lot, but I did not think it was as amazing as Beneath a Scarlet Sky, and that's okay. So if you loved this one a lot more, I understand why, because it's phenomenal and Kristen Hanna is an exceptional writer. I've read a number of her books, and I find them to be really well done. So why not, you know? But this, I kind of was a little hesitant because the hype was pretty big for it, but I did like it, and for many of you, you probably liked it as well. Here's a couple honorable mentions that I wanted to bring up. One is called The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom, and this is certainly a little not historical fiction. This is basically an autobiography. I did feel like I needed to bring this up because to me, it was one of my first introductions to this time period, and the story was profound. And it is a story. And of course, the all-time great classic with The Diary of Anne Frank. Again, that's really not so much a historical fiction. That's just, of course, a biography, autobiography at that. And it's worth your time and effort. I would also include Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut because while it does come at you in that story format and with Kurt Vonnegut's wit and his unique writing style, there's so much there that was grounded in the reality of his life and came from that it's worth your time and effort. I've read a number of other books that fit into this genre, but why not a little less from me and a little more from you now? What would you recommend? What have you read that really stood out in this genre? I'd love to hear about it. And for those of you interested, you can check out my wish list there on Amazon, and I'll put whatever other links I think you might find interesting as well. Who knows what kind of social media platform is still in existence after all these billionaires buying up some and threatening to close down. You never know what's going to take place. So for now, thanks for tuning into YouTube. Like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you soon.